Okay, well, in thinking further about principles, this is about as far as we got, but it's important. The net force is the sum of all the forces, right? And implicitly, then, we want to identify all our forces, okay? So what are our forces?
Normal force.
Okay? Now, before we identify our forces, what should we really probably do? Draw a picture. I mean, just a little schematic diagram, right?
Yeah.
So you got a cart, or car, you know. Smiley face, ears, and a tail. Okay, you got a car, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now, there's a normal force acting on it, right? So you got a normal force. Do I have the normal force in the right direction?
Yeah. 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 I think so.
Why, how do I know that's in the right direction?
Because it's opposite from your other force, which is mass times gravity.
It is.
Okay, let's go back to another principle.
The normal force is the force being from the table counteracting the force of gravity, and the
Normal force is what? Table counteracting, well, in this situation, yeah, but there are other situations where you have other forces involved. Yeah, normal force is elastic. Is an elastic or compressive force.
If it's at an incline, the normal force will still be out of gravity. So,
surface normal force.
directly out of it.
What it is a force that's perpendicular to the surface the object comes along.
Okay, so aggressive.
Now, there are probably better definitions, and you can look them up, and you should.
It's the force of
But this gets most of it.
it's the force
It's the elastic and or compressive force exerted in response to all the other forces perpendicular to the surface.
in this
Yeah.
case.
Or I maybe should have said the components of all other forces which are perpendicular to the surface. Okay? And you've got to word that kind of carefully. Even that wording is not great. Okay? So from this definition, what can you tell me about the normal force in any situation?
It's equal to.
Well, I'm not sure the definition completely implies that we might have to do a little more work, but it's perpendicular to the surface.
It is sufficient to keep
I'm
it
sorry?
off. It is an exact amount given off in response to, in this case, the forces acting along the y direction, which would be gravity.
Exactly, that's exactly how we'd apply it to this situation. It's the reaction to the force exerted by gravity, essentially. Okay, and you said a
It'll
lot
have a
more
net
words, and they were all
force
good
of
words.
0.
Okay,
Isn't it mass times gravity?
so you have the weight which is mg, okay? But you gotta have a direction. What's the direction of the weight?
Down.
Huh?
Down.
How do you describe a downward force?
It is along the y-axis.
How do you describe a force along the y-axis?
Towards the center of the earth.
I don't want to put an arrow over this because it isn't quite right.
An arrow down.
Well, you've seen me do it many times. Now, as soon as I use J, I'd better identify my x and y axes, right?
Won't it be negative mg?
Yeah, it is. So I was so busy getting the J in there. Thank you. Okay? Make sense? Okay. Okay, so you got the weight, and we can say that about the weight, right? What other force do we have?
Force of friction.
I'm sorry?
The force of friction.
Frictional force, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the frictional force. Now, we're going to also assume motion in the positive x direction. So the frictional force. Frictional force, and it equals negative of F normal. Well, I'll put the mu in there. Mu times F normal times I. And I kind of bunched that up, but I think you can read it, okay? And this assuming motion in the x direction. And I should have said in the positive x direction, but that is the x direction, okay? Make sense? Okay. So this much analysis and thinking through these principles ought to be more or less instant. But you got to think, here are the principles it involves, so now I can do this. Maybe you want to do this, but you'd better think back to the principles that allow you to do it, okay? Instead of immediately grabbing a formula and plugging in numbers without units, okay? Well, okay, is my picture pretty good?